All right. Good evening, everybody. A very warm welcome. It's very encouraging to see lots of you making time to be a part of this conversation. And to make it worth your time, I have put together a very unique panel that will help to make a very rich discussion around learning and inclusion. And over the next hour, my hope is that all of you take away some food for thought, a new direction, some fresh ideas to think about and apply in your respective fields of work or communities. So today we'll discuss inclusive learning from the perspective of mainstream schools, edtech apps, early intervention, and then finally growth perspectives and a community's role in fostering neurodiversity. So without further ado, I'll introduce myself and our guests for the evening. So my name is Shreya and I'm your host for the evening. I'm a chemical engineer and MBA, and I turned to the education field almost 4 years ago, inspired by my brother's journey, who has autism. I ran an edtech startup in the space of neurodiversity. And last year, I joined forces with BYJU'S to create experiential classrooms for children with learning differences. And today, the first guest on my panel is Sumedha Khoche. So Sumedha was born in Delhi, and she completed her MBA from IIM Indore. Over the last few years, she has led sales, insights, and consumer marketing at PepsiCo and P&G in Singapore. She's a serial entrepreneur, but she believes that she discovered her true passion for teaching and early education when her kids were born. So that's when she paired up with her batchmate from IIM Indore, Shireen Sultana, and launched KinderPass. That's inspired by the Montessori teaching method and is focused on the age groups 0 to 4. We're going to come back to her with lots of questions, but welcome, Sumedha. The next guest on my panelist, the next panelist I have today is Erica, who's from the team that's built one of the most loved learning apps by all kids. Erica is a director at Osmo and has worked in the education space for over 10 years. She's a graduate from the California State University and started as a preschool teacher and then worked as a program specialist at Stanford, but then finally realized her true passion is discovering the application of technology to our curriculum. She was also the former Early Care and Education Commissioner at San Jose. And since she's worked so closely with the education, the school ecosystem, she's excited to see how technology can be infused with existing curriculums to create a high energy learning platform. Next, I'd like to introduce Rahul Jindal, who was born in Chandigarh, but now lives in Hyderabad with his family, where he works as the global director for scale operations and social practices at Google. Rahul has also been my mentor and strategy advisor at my previous startup. And he says that he finds great joy when he knows that his work is in one way or the other making someone's life better. His journey with neurodiversity began when his son was diagnosed with autism, but soon he became a staunch advocate of the community. And today we'll also uncover a more recent relationship that he's discovered with the community. So we'll come back to that. But our final guest for the evening is from our own home ground, Roshini Kavina, who is our senior creative director at BYJU'S. So she comes from a very rich background of advertising across beauty, lifestyle, fashion brands, and over the last 2 decades has worked in film, online print, and even on-ground assets. Her efforts have added several feathers to her cap, from the Cannes to the Effie's Award. And in her spare time, she also teaches children and young adults at Dharavi through Econ Foundation. But what's interesting to me about her is the unique perspective she brings to BYJU'S through her personal and professional experiences. So in the past few conversations, Roshini spoke about how she was diagnosed with dyslexia and type 2 bipolar disorder as an adult. Okay, welcome panelists. Very, very excited to have you here. And I'm going to dive right in. So I think in the first round, what I want to do is I want to help the audience to get to know you all better. But along with that, through your experiences and your history, paint a picture of what our current education system looks like. So I want to start with you, Roshini, today. And I want to understand that, when you did not have a diagnosis when you were younger, right? what was school like? Were you always a creative kid, or were things not that simple? So if you could help the audience paint a picture of what schooling system looks like for children who don't learn in the most conventional ways, or who are neurodiverse, what's that like for you? Over to you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. First, getting right into it. So schooling, I think, were by far the worst years of my life. It's very different now, though. We have a lot of inclusive schools now, but not all, but there are some inclusive schools, and it has a good spectrum of different mindsets, living, breathing, and learning there. But I'm talking about the 80s, where there was very little or absolutely no knowledge about dyslexia or any kind of, first of all, it was called a learning disability at that time. That itself, said that this child was not very bright. In school, you know how it was. It was either bright kids or dumb kids. There was nothing in the middle. It was extremely white, black and white. I showed extremely strong and early signs which ideally should have been picked up, but they were not. I was surrounded with very kind people. My teachers were very kind. My parents were very kind. They were very patient with me, but they didn't see my signs. They just completely overlooked it, saying that she's a distracted child. She's very mischievous. She's very naughty, and she does not want to listen. She's rebellious and all of that. Although I would continuously complain of not being able to read. I would write very strange alphabets. I would mirror image everything. I was very, very creative right from the start. I would get lost in making things for hours together. By hours, I mean literally hours. I would get lost. I would be sitting in one place and just making things out of trash or something that I've collected. I would interact with children, but I was a complete daydreamer. I would, be by myself most of the time, just completely in love with nature, or just looking in the skies and getting lost and seeing shapes everywhere. So it was right there. It was now when I look back at it, and I think that, why didn't anybody pick up these signs? But that's because nobody thought that way at that time. It was not for any other reason, but people just didn't think that way. It was regular schools and special schools. Special schools had the entire spectrum of, learning disability or neurodiversity, inclusive of cerebral palsy and more profound, differences. So schooling was, it was not pleasant, but I think being surrounded by people, it was helpful. It helped me become a better person with everything else but study. So I was good with, I was in fact great with everything from elocution to drawing to sports to any kind of extracurricular activity, and I would score A+. And when it came to study, I would score like very, very low. So yeah, it was a journey. I studied like literally spellings almost till my 10th standard to just write clearly and not get negative marks. But it was a journey that kind of helped me become a better student and work harder, I guess. I can just put a positive spin to end with. So yeah, that was cool for me.
Thanks so much, Roshini. I mean, I can't imagine that to be easy at all. In fact, if I think back and look over the decades, I can imagine how getting a diagnosis was very rare. In fact, even when my brother, in the early 2000s tried to get a diagnosis, nobody had really heard of the word autism around us. In fact, very, very few people knew about neurodivergent conditions. A recent study says that people often switch between 3 to 4 doctors, often pediatricians, to receive the right guidance. And I'd like to come to you next, Rahul. You have a son who has autism, and I recently saw an interview where you said you have learned a lot about yourself through his journey. I'm wondering what that experience was like, and if you could share some of your reflections over the years.
Absolutely. I want to first congratulate Roshini. You continue with your excellent elocution. So that talent is definitely shining through. So yeah, my son is now 8 years old. This journey started for us when he was under 2, I want to say about 22 months. an unrelated condition actually got us to the doctor, who said that don't worry about that skin thing, but I'm a bit concerned he's not making eye contact, all that usual things, which now sound usual to me. Uh, but I think a life-changing advice was given by a pediatric neurologist who actually now practices in the UK. We've not had the opportunity to meet them again, but they told me that, Rahul, here is what you need to understand. You need to understand the difference between a disease and a disorder. A disease is to be cured, or may be cured, may not be cured, but it is something that seeks a cure. A disorder is to be managed, right? So, and that made such a great difference to my perspective from that point on. I mean, still remember it, still call it out as probably one of the greatest advices. I kind of use it in many different contexts also, in corporate life and leadership. Is to understand the difference, right? To understand the difference between a problem and a polarity. A problem is to be solved, a polarity is to be managed, and so on and so forth. So I thought that was really fascinating. This 6-year journey from that point on has been really fascinating. I would say that another excellent advice I actually picked up from a poster at one of the first therapy centers where he went, which said that you may not have the child that you dreamt that you would, but if you're lucky, you will become the parent that you were always meant to be. Uh, and that again applies to many other contexts, right? You may not have the partner that you thought you would, but if you're lucky, you will become a great partner for them, and so on and so forth. I think it's really raising this child, Kairav, has been really such a coming of age kind of experience for me. I mean, I wonder if the child did not have this condition. I mean, I would have been such a flop show in my own life in other endeavors. So I really think it's excellent. So the reading that I did, I sometimes like to call that I'm a PhD from Jindal University. I mean, I've just read so much over the last 6 years, made me realize, made me explain a lot of things about my own self, right? Something similar along the lines of Roshni's experience. I never got any formal diagnosis ever, but self-diagnosis wise, I definitely think I would be somewhere on the ADHD spectrum. I definitely think I would be somewhere on the highly functional, but still on the autism spectrum, maybe previously known as Asperger's. I have really unique, sometimes weird interests. I can go on and on, so somebody will have to stop me in this panel also. Uh, I realized after benefiting from the inputs of a lot of people at the company where I work, this whole spectrum of awareness, awareness, acceptance, and advocacy. So it really took many years to build more awareness. In the last few years, also feeling somewhat comfortable with acceptance, and in the last few years, also in parallel, I was awakened to the responsibility that I have as a leader in that company, as a leader in the society, as a person with a voice, to advocate for myself, my child, but everybody in that spectrum. And in fact, that's how I ran into a lot of you, over the years. So, just raising the child that I have made me understand and accept myself a lot more. I mean, I always was pretty, harsh about, why am I different than others? I still have such a poor handwriting. Sometimes I struggle to understand, but now I know there's a term for it called dysgraphia. Right? I have such deep interest in topics which many others do not. And conversely, I do not have interest in topics. I'm going to almost be blasphemous now. As an Indian man, I actually don't understand cricket. When people like, oh my God, what a ball that was. I was like, why was that such a great ball? But it's okay. I've come to realize that it's okay. I mean, you are you, and I'm picking up the vocabulary from some of the younger friends that you do you, right? Which I think it means that, hey, just be happy with who you are and just try to be the best version of yourselves. So it's been quite a coming of age journey for me, Shreya.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and being so candid about your experiences. I know this conversation is in a very nascent stage, especially for like a lot of my friends and young adults I've been meeting in my community who've recently got a diagnosis, and they don't really know what they should do with this information. Because for so long they've had to adapt their ways or even mask their neurodivergence to fit into various social settings. But it always makes me wonder, if we could go back and like turn the clock, how could we create a more nurturing environment for this community, or like for us who don't fit into conventional boxes, especially when we're really young. And Sumedha, I want to come to you here, right? You understand the early intervention space really well. So first of all, could you help us understand why did we ignore early signs for so long, right? Why was it so hard for us to look at these early signs and follow through on them? Why is it important to have early intervention, and what's the long-term impact it can have in a child's life?
Sure. Again, I'm a parent, right? So I'm going to give you the little bit of, the parent speak as well. See, the thing is, parenting, kids, all of this is uncharted territory. This is not curriculum. This is not taught at a university. You kind of take each day as it comes and you learn your way through it. And even kids, they're dynamic, right? When we say early intervention, first of all, we should know there is no one marker, right? There is no one sign which will distinguish right from wrong or good or bad. It doesn't fall in that neat bracket. So when parents sometimes notice something might be off, it's usually the parental instinct talking, observation or, things that they have seen around or comparison with other kids. And sometimes you kind of second guess yourself, right? Hey, did it really happen, or was it just me? You sometimes don't figure out whether it's the right thing. Sometimes people around you tell you, hey, don't stop worrying, you're such an overthinker, what are you talking about? Pediatricians will sometimes tell you that, oh, all kids are the same, everybody grows up, don't worry about it, come to me when it's something really serious. So you second guess yourself. Sometimes you don't even know what to look out for. Is this normal? You don't know. Early intervention, really think of it this way, that, you're walking into a room, the room is dark. Do you switch on the light now, or do you switch on the light after 10 hours? You could fumble your way around it and everything will still be this way it is, but you lose out on some time. It's literally that. The idea of early intervention is to really take advantage of neuroplasticity, right? When the brain is the most malleable, it's like Play-Doh. You can do a lot more. It's not as to say that, you can never do that, but if you do it at that time, it will take less repetition, less effort. You will just get much better outcomes, and be it in terms of literacy or social skills, your odds of success are just that much more. So that's the importance of early intervention. That, as they say, the earlier you start, the better it is, but it's never too late. So really, that's my 2 cents on early intervention. It's why it's so hard, but at the same time, it's so critical.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come back on some of those points later. There's some interesting questions about neuroplasticity from the audience as well. So we're going to come back to that. But I think what's also really interesting is that just a little bit of support, like you said, can help a student bloom instead of them going into their shell, with a little bit of support from their environment. But interestingly, when we talk so much about providing support to our learners to integrate better into our neurotypical societies, I had a really interesting question from one of the audiences. So Uttara, who is a senior art associate from BYJU'S, she asks that what are some prerequisites for developing learning experiences that are inclusive and cater to fostering neurodiversity? And so she also asks from like a designer's perspective that, how can creators learn to meet the needs of learners from various backgrounds, disabilities, or cultural differences even, right? And to me, this is really interesting because we're thinking about the other side as well now. And Erica, I want to come to you now, right? Your vision has always been to completely change the way we learn and turn the world into an interactive learning environment that is sort of a mixture of physical and digital learning. I want to know what motivated you to take this alternative approach, why you think it's important to break away from some of the conventional ways we learn.
So one of the big things for me personally is I do have family members who are definitely on the spectrum. And then I also have a cousin who is autistic. And then working with students and starting as a teacher for myself is you do have a lot of students that sometimes are not diagnosed, or you see certain things and sometimes it's parents that just are like, nope, my kid is fine. And they just kind of push them along. And especially in the States, sometimes we do have a program with No Child Left Behind. However, there does come a point where you want to still help and encourage students. And one of the big things that I've learned just working with very diverse people in general is you should always ask why. Like, why is like someone doing, like repeating the same phrase from a movie, something like that. And it's interesting, especially working with children and understanding that is, yes, sometimes you will have a child who may be autistic, who are doing the same repeated motion multiple times, or they are very focused on one particular thing. It's important for people just to kind of take a step back and kind of keep asking themselves why. Because if you think about it, anything that someone on the spectrum does is actually something that most humans typically do at some point. Like, if you think about it, like if you like, I'm going to say like sometimes there's students who are going to be scratching themselves and they're scratching themselves in the same place. You see adults who bite their nails. It's a very similar function. It's just actually understanding the viewpoint of where they are coming from and why they keep repeating stuff. So that was a big thing for me, is being able to take the approach of incorporating something that is not necessarily typical for everybody to do and bring it back to the tangible aspects, because there's so much that bringing tangible features into students and even with adults is, it makes it very multi-sensory for someone instead of just being told a lesson or being lectured to. Is people have different learning abilities, and I don't care who you are, you could be the smartest person in the world, having someone lecture something to you, you may not retain that information as doing something hands-on. So that's been a big thing for me just in my teaching experience, and then also with my career, is being able to reach people on all different levels to make sure that it's very multi-sensory, because that does definitely affect people in different ways, and it kind of will resonate with people in different ways, whether it is a physical thing or it is like being able to just touch on having something be multi-sensory has been very important, especially for students, and especially in our day of everything is technology, and with our world now, is people want that automatic gratification. And so being able to figure out ways to also understand it and reach a child and give them that gratification, but be able to also have the other motors being like functional and having them being auditory, everything like that as well too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to come back to you with more specific questions in terms of thinking about the product, or coming back to Uttara's question from a more specific point of view. But for those of you who've just tuned in, a very quick recap of the last 30 minutes. We've discussed how schools essentially can be extremely isolating. I think Roshini has shed light on that. But now we're more and more becoming aware of identifying signs. And given that there's so many of you attending this conversation, it's a sign that this conversation is growing. There's also now increasing evidence that the impact of early intervention is really, it goes a long way. And hopefully this awareness will help us combat and some of the misgivings and stigma as well. And while I'm really excited to
while we wait for Shreya to come back, I think it's really excellent to have such a curated panel, and then really, really personally encouraged to see such a large participation. I think Shreya was saying that the very fact that people are taking time in the middle of a working week to join means at least the mission is moving forward for more people to feel more accepted, for more people to kind of support others. And this is really, really excellent. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm sure she'll be back in a few minutes, but we are here.
I think there's a question, right, on residential school. I think, Aditi, it'll be great if we can connect after this, because, there's no one size that fits all. Depending on, what your exact requirements are, probably we could make some suggestions. Actually, in the meantime, if anybody else has any questions, you can please feel free to post them, and we can probably answer those.
Yeah, Mansi has an excellent question. I'm sure Erica has her life's experience in addressing this. The role of tech in making teaching and learning inclusive. I'm sorry. I think tech is everything. Tech is everywhere. I can share my quick perspective. At Google, our mission is to make the world's information universally accessible and available. So when we say we want to make our products available for everyone, literally means everyone. And this is not a small community of people and children who learn differently. So tech, of course, can bridge the gaps, bridge the barriers between innovation in one part of the world rapidly being available in the other. Can, of course, I think computer vision type of technologies can also assist reading facial expressions when that may not be natively a capability. Speech technologies. In fact, my son uses this app, which is a part of a broader technology called assistive and augmentative communication. It's not only for children who haven't natively developed as much speech technologies, but anybody who needs any assistance. So technology is, I'm so excited about what is already available, but what will be available with the advances in AI and ML in a few years. So massive, massive roles. But I think the expert on the topic is Erica. Do you want to share a perspective?
So some of the different things that we do is I work for a company called Osmo. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with that, but basically what Osmo does is it takes physical pieces and then it relates it to students for potentially math, spelling, and then teaches in different ways. So one of the big things with Osmo is it's bringing back the tactile aspects, but giving the automatic gratification of technology. And one of the big things that we do with it is combining the AI. Oh, I think she might have joined. Combining the AI and then also making it very inclusive for everyone in the aspect where we do break it down and simplify certain aspects of the program, just so that way all students can kind of like interact with it and engage with it. And then we also make it more advanced. Some of the different features that we also try to always do is for students in general is being able to have those different auditory sounds, or being able to also offer certain prompts just to kind of support students with it. One big thing that I've seen just working with schools in general is, even when I was a student in school, you would see that sometimes in elementary, teachers would automatically place students who are excelling in one group and students who might be having more difficulties in another group, or sometimes students would be pulled out of the classroom to get additional help. And one of the big things that we try to do is make sure everybody can use the platform, so students actually don't know what level they are starting at in comparison to their peers, just to make sure that they are all utilizing it as well.
If I can quickly add, as a consumer of some of these apps, I think I absolutely love the adaptive aspects of learning, which can be coded into tech-enabled apps and systems, as opposed to traditional classrooms where there's just one person giving the lecture, which everybody else is supposed to understand and operate at, irrespective of what their level of understanding is. So yeah, there are many apps. The one that our family uses is called Homer. There's another one which is called Meta, MIT, and both of them are exceptional pieces of computer science marvel, I would say, where they actually assess the child where they are on certain learning paths and then create those. Of course, our friend here, Sumedha is building another tech platform, so we'd love to hear about that. But welcome back, Shreya.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I think the entire office's internet went off because I tried to log in from someone. We'll not waste more time on this. Sorry, Sumedha, I'll come back to you. I was asking you to help the audience understand about the different formats of schooling that exist, right? So there's mainstream schools, inclusive schools, integrated schools. So if you could help us understand what works, what doesn't work, and where is this heading in the future?
Right. I think inclusion is a big word, right? So inclusive schools are probably the way forward. Say places like Australia, schools are inclusive, meaning everybody, irrespective of learning capability, learning ability, disability, differences in thinking, differences in learning, everybody learns together, right? And the learning is kind of adjusted. I think all of this, Shreya, would boil down to how much awareness and training and sensitivity the educators and the administrative staff have on a day-to-day basis, right? To take a very practical example, it could be an inclusive school, but if the child is being told to stop stimming or to not make any distracting movements in class because everybody else is getting disturbed, well, it is a way of regulation for the child, right? So some people eat or you chew on their pencil, some people twirl their hair, some people bang on the table. It is just a way of regulation. So if there's a way to bring about more sensitivity into what each of us kind of goes through and how we learn and how we kind of adapt, I think that would be number one. The different formats of schools, I think, are not as important because everybody at the end of the day is trying to help parents and help the learners achieve their full potential, right? So sometimes we also need to figure out what the definition of that potential is and who's judging that, where is it getting capped out. Sometimes kids who've gone through inclusive schools, maybe they reach a certain level and they figure out that, okay, this is it. Now I have to go into an open school curriculum where a lot of the questions may not be relevant, where a lot of the topics may not be relevant. So I think there's a bit of mismatch in what real life could be. And there's so much more today, right? And there are so many different ways of learning. There's virtual reality, there are simulations, there are a lot of things that we could bring about to get in and to kind of tide over the practical real life obstacles. But this definition of potential, understanding what regulation means and understanding how each individual is different, that sensitivity somewhere needs to get ingrained even at an educator level. That's when all the different formats will start making sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. In fact, I'm thinking about the role of just larger fundamental changes, systemic changes. And I want to bring in another audience question here. So Priyank Rastogi, who's an engineer at Oracle, he asks, what role do governments play in creating inclusive environments for neurodivergent learners? And Rahul, I want to come to you next, right? Because I think you've given your experience in leading efforts towards inclusivity at Google and in your community. Could you help us understand the role of leaders, right? Or even policymakers, for that matter, in driving behavior change and adopting a more universal approach overall? Or maybe you could even help us, you could refer us to some policies or models that we can look up to for inspiration.
Absolutely, Shreya. So I actually believe that the single most important role for anybody in a leadership position is to do, as the title says, so leaders lead, right? And I think we are in a little bit of a not such a great situation in the world in general, because so many of the people in leading jobs aren't leading. They should be leading, whether it's politics or government or corporations or NGOs and so on and so forth. I really think, I'm stating the obvious, but that people in public positions, have an immense role to play in society and setting the tone for the rest to follow. So I actually think the role of governments is to provide a framework wherever applicable. I don't think it's that much applicable here to provide legislation and so on and so forth. I actually think, I don't know if the audience is mostly from India, but we have an excellent national education policy that came in a few years ago. It of course is contingent on this standing on the pillars of access, equity, quality, and accountability. there is this in Hindi, the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, that means education for all children, has a specific subsection which is about the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which is that even children with any special needs caused by any difference or disability, they also have the right of completing education at the elementary and secondary levels. But I think, as with many things related to law in India, I think the laws are good, the enforcement is not so much. But I do feel that governments, any government in any country, I think they will move at a bit of a glacial pace. I feel what I find very inspiring is how leaders in the society, that means so many of parents and self-advocates themselves, the change that they are trying to bring in. So as much disappointment as one experiences as a student, as a child, or as a parent in mainstream schools in India, the similar, that is more than made up for in the encouragement and support that one gets in private groups. That the same is for our family. And while the school was a bit of a disappointment, even after 5 years of trying to educate them, but the community gives you such a feeling of that you belong here. So I feel that governments have a role to play, but I actually want to amplify the role of society and societal leaders who are there to play. In terms of role models, I actually don't think there is like one that I want to specifically call out for a job that is excellently done. I think there are some subscale operations in schools and in other places, but I think I really call upon edtech companies with their scope and access to technology, tech in edtech, right? So and also resources to kind of work for this community, because and I actually am very keen that the topic of supporting the community, in this example, neurodiverse children or children who learn differently, should not be approached as a charitable cause. And that actually pains me that there is serious money to be made here. The families of children with special needs is not a poor community. Globally, generally speaking, individuals with some disabilities or differences and their caregivers, they have a collective purchasing power of $6 trillion. If that was a country, that would be the third largest country, I mean, the third biggest GDP in that sense. So I actually call upon entrepreneurs and private enterprise to come in and solve for this community's needs. There is serious money to be made. Outside of money to be made, I always get motivated by what is known as the curb cut effect, which means that when you actually design for a minority, you actually make the experience of the majority better. So designing for a underrepresented group, anything, whether it's a policy or a system or a technology or anything, makes it better for everybody else. So I would say that the role of leaders is three things. Talk about it like we are doing today, and thank you for everyone's leadership here. Ask about it. Ask people who are accountable to you. That includes your government representatives about it. How well are we catering to the needs of everybody, and also fund it. I think merely just talking and asking is not going to be sufficient, but fund it knowing fully well that you will get more than your money's worth. If you build high quality solutions, because this community is very large. These are not fringe needs. Look at the number of people on this call. Look at the people around us. Almost everybody knows somebody or the other who's neurodiverse in 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So those are the three things I would say. It's a long topic, but I'll stop here.
No, that's really, really helpful. And I think talk about it, ask about it, and fund it are going to be my very, very effective campaigning goals from now on. But I want to build on everything that you just said and come to you, Erica. I think, like Rahul said, driving systemic changes can be very complex. In fact, I want to take our own example. I want to start at home, and BYJU'S obviously is a very large organization, right? So what do you think are some good steps, or is a good starting point for us as an edtech company that's looking to make this shift to inculcate a culture of accessibility and inclusion, not just internally, but also in our products? How can we encourage our leaders, our designers, content creators, and end users that there is actually merit in designing for a larger audience? And where do we start?
So from the I'm going to use Osmo as an example. From the beginning with Osmo, what we did is, since we are based in California, there was all of our testing happened with every student that was in California, and California is its own little bubble in many ways. So that was one thing that I had to advocate for within the company as well, is we needed to make sure that we were testing in other states and with other communities, and not just focused on here's Silicon Valley, this is what's convenient for us, and this is what is, in a sense, easy for us to access, and making it more of a challenge, because you do have to also hit different areas and different communities. Because even when you are working with students, like so many students are on like IEPs, and sorry, for anyone who doesn't know that, those are individualized education programs that are sometimes like made for a particular student, and it's like what helps with like services, and it will provide different things. But one of the big things with a tech company in general, and as you are thinking about programs and how to also facilitate them for students, is just making sure, okay, how can we reach every demographic for this? Something that might come very natural and easy to me is not going to work for everybody else who I work with. And then also being able to keep that in mind, because we all are very different learners and things resonate with us in different ways. So being able to take an approach, even if you have a student who is an amazing speller, just because they can spell great doesn't mean that they can read something and then actually reiterate it back to you and know what they actually read. So it's important to actually break down all of those different features and then allow students to kind of build upon it. So that's something that's really important when you are thinking about your own child, or also just students in general, and then also being able to apply that when you are actually building a platform and potentially an activity for students, is how can we simplify this, but then also make it very engaging and advanced for different students, because people and kids are going to relate to things in different ways. So one of the big things in general, and I know you and I have had this discussion multiple times, is being able to relate it back to their own personal life. So for example, making it where if it's going into a store and having those social settings, maybe even doing it in a virtual setting, is giving that student exposure to it as well, just to kind of give them real life interactions as well.
For sure. I think I fundamentally completely agree with that approach, right? That if a student is not able to gain the entire experience in one go, how can we break that down, simplify it, and then let the child learn at their own pace?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I also want to go back to a point that was made earlier, which was that along with leaders in companies, we also really, really have to think about our society and, how as a community we come together. And Roshini, I'm going to throw a tough one at you now. I think this is a challenge that as a country, and I think many other countries face since, many, many years, that how do we bring the masses together, right? There is so much stigma. There is so many misconceptions around neurodiversity that, I think it's really hard to combat that while advocating for newer solutions. So how do you think we can effectively communicate, to build better awareness, to mobilize our communities, to be more open-minded about having this conversation without perception barriers?
I believe it's what we're doing now. This is the beginning. We're talking about it, which is most important. People don't know what neurodiversity is. I mean, they've seen movies and they think everybody who's not, stereotypical is weird, is different, and is difficult to approach and difficult to understand. We're not that different. We are living in an age where we celebrate our differences. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate our cultures. We're very accepting of each other's very, very dramatically different lifestyles these days. I don't understand what is the big deal about, celebrating each other's differences in the way we think, because it's not that different. I mean, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, right? I see it as simply as that. Yeah. None of us are quintessentially perfect as a whole, right? We all have ups and downs. We are all built differently. We all have different quotients of intellect. There are so many different kinds of intellect. First of all, we are told since we are in school that there are only these two kinds of intellects, that we have to read, write, and you have to reproduce. You have to think in a particular lateral way. Imagine if the whole world thought in one single pattern. Everybody would be so boring. I think neurodiversity brings so much flavor into our community, and we are all different levels of neurodiverse, and we have different ways of coping with it. You would not know I am dyslexic if I would have not said that to you right now. Why would you know? I mean, there is, and more. I mean, it's really strange that that people think that everybody who's slightly different than I am must be weird, or is not clever because she cannot write the way I write. Yes, I can't write the way most people write, but my focus is so good. I can I have an endless range of remembering things. My long-term memory is fantastic. So it's like I said, it's ups and downs, and the more we talk about it, the more people understand that one person is no different than the other. It's just that we all are different, and so are the neurodiverse and the neurotypical and the rest of us. It's the same thing. What's required is for people to understand how to be a little more empathetic or be a little helpful towards it. It's as simple as, if somebody is hurt and you're in and you see that person enter a bus, you're going to get up, right? You're going to let that person sit down, or you're going to ask, would you like a glass of water? It's just about being nice to each other, and just trying to understand that everybody is different, and it's no big deal. Really, it's no big deal.
You make that sound really simple. And I feel like I want to send you to everybody who I know and be like, please talk to them. Sit down with Roshini for a couple of minutes to hear why you should care about this. No, but thank you for that. And, to think about small changes that we can all make, be it in our governments, be it in schools, our communities. And I think what gives me a lot of hope is that I'm a staunch believer that the whole is definitely going to be greater than the sum of its parts, right? And hopefully that will lead to better growth perspectives and community integration. And coming back to what you just said about empathy and compassion. So a audience question is here. So Kavya, who's an associate director at Novartis, she's asked that how can we inculcate compassion in a world where education is seen as business? And Rahul, I want to come back to you because we've had the opportunity to discuss empathy and compassion over the last few years. In fact, we've workshopped this, we workshopped different interpretations of this with several of your teams at Google. So how do you approach DEI as a culture, and more than that, as products that are meant to be more inclusive?
Absolutely, and thank you for the workshops. And in fact, the workshop title is where some of the spirit of the answer lies, right? Those workshops that Shreya very carefully crafted for us and others is called #MadeEqual, right? And I want to build on Roshini's point that different is not equal to less. So that's what's been guiding some of the thought process. So at Google, like I said, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And we want to build for everyone. When we say we want to build for everyone, it literally means everyone, n equal to 1. Even that last user with very unique needs, we want to build for them, because we know that when we build for that very unique needs, it will make the experience of everybody else better. I don't know if it's well known or not, but all these speech assistants were actually built for people who had speech impediments, and now all of us use it. And there are many, 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 many more examples like that. So in general, the belief is that diversity makes business sense. And like I like to say, please don't support diversity for charity. Please support because it will make your company stand apart. It will make your society, your family stand apart. There's greater retention, there's greater growth, there's greater joy in a place that actually embraces DEI. In fact, we now don't even say DEI, we say DIB. So it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. People have to feel that they belong here. So there's a very kind of organic culture of leaders sharing their experiences. I myself, for example, do lots of roundtables every month where we want to hear people. Creating a psychological safe environment means that everybody sort of feels belonged, irrespective of their differences that they bring to the table, because their differences are welcome. Their differences collectively actually make us better. So we of course bring in experts like Shreya from time to time from India and all over the world. So that is there. There are also employee resource groups. The one that I used to sponsor, and other leaders are now carrying the mantle forward, is called Disability Alliance, which is an employee resource group, and it's modeled on the same thing that we were talking about. That it is more a bottom up. Here, employees who identify with some differences in direct capacity, or as a caregiver, or simply as an ally, right? They actually come together and advocate. They advocate, educate, and do those kind of things. In fact, like I said, leaders lead in the way that it's actually considered to be an excellent trait if you are an ally. You may not have any differences that you want to talk about. You may not be comfortable, you may not be aware, or you may not have differences from the majority. But if you're an ally, it's actually looked up as a very good thing. So I think putting in some of those organic mechanisms really makes for a great workplace, makes for a great society, makes for a great family, great neighborhood. So that's it. Finally, of course, we are a tech company after all. So there is a rating scale for accessible products. It's called the Google Accessibility Rating, GAR. Which is about the technical accessibility of software products. So we have OKRs. These are goals at the company level that any product with more than 25 million monthly active users has to meet the highest GAR requirements. Right. So I mean, these things are not difficult to do. I'm saying no rocket science here, but I would say that leaders need to lead. We need to walk the talk, and we need to walk the talk not because out of charitable or compassion in our hearts. Of course, that's important, but we need to do it because this is a very large community, and this community is waiting for high quality products and services, which just makes business sense. So I want to say, as a business person, a business is not a bad word. Like with everything else, intent is what matters, right? Business can be done with the right intent, and business sometimes is done with a bad intent. So let's not vilify business, but let us be driven by the right kind of values where business stands for good.
Thank you for that. That was, I think, a really, really good mix of tangible things that we can take back home and also just rethink the way we've approached this till now. We have a couple of minutes left, and I think I wouldn't do justice to this conversation if I did not ask you about the future and your aspirations for the future. So if very quickly we could go in around in terms of when we say the future of learning is inclusive, which is what the theme for today is, what does the future look like to you, right? If you could all share aspirations, 2 aspirations each, of where you'd like to see us go, in which direction would we move? Sumedha, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. See, again, my passion is early intervention. The sooner we begin, the better. I think at a very, very base level, if we can destigmatize the whole process, and if we can drive a little bit of more awareness and sensitivity and empathy, I think Tare Zameen Pe, what they did for dyslexia, for all its, all the different things that the movie stood for, I think everybody understood a little bit more of what dyslexia was, because they went at it in different ways. It was very mass, very mainstream, but I wish that could happen for all the different conditions. I wish some filmmaker would just take it upon themselves to do that. And secondly, as a society, I think all of us here, most of us are wearing specs or lenses or something, right? Do we judge each other for wearing spectacles? It's a tool at the end of the day, right? It's an aid which is helping us live in the same world, even though we look at things a little differently. I wish we could extend the same analogy to some of the other, learning challenges, provide the right kind of support without the judgment, without the stigma, and be more accepting. Yeah.
Thank you. Erica.
I would love to see our future basically in education be more of a collaboration. I think that's a big thing where it's a partnership between the students, the families, and then also the different organizations that they're working with, and being able to actually support each other. And because support is a big factor that I feel like is sometimes missing, is not everybody fits in the same box, and being able to support different learners and having that collaboration, and then also being able to make everybody feel supported is something that's really big in my opinion, is because you don't want to isolate people, because that does sometimes hinder students later on in their performance if they do feel like they are isolated from the rest of the group, and making it more inclusive just in general in education, and basically just allowing everyone to feel part of it, because everyone is different and everyone is unique and has different talents, and being able to celebrate those different talents as well, because students on the spectrum provide so much to other students as well. And I think it's important to celebrate some of those differences and bring that more to light for basically everybody who works with those students, and then just overall as a whole as well.
Thank you. Rahul, what does the future look like?
Yeah, I think the future looks like that the movies and the stories have been told, movies have been made on the topic, products and services have been built, and inclusion and belonging has been landed in the social construct. And I put it this way because I really feel that it is easy to feel pessimistic. And by feeling, our community is small, of parents or self-advocates and allies, we cannot feel down, right? We have to believe that a change is possible, and a change is indeed possible, right? I mean, the Indian society, and I wrote about it a few months ago, that I'm amazed by the Indian society's ability to leapfrog, go from being very backward on something to being the world leading in that same thing in a matter of 1.5 generation. So I really believe that it is possible, and I really thank people who joined today. Thank everybody here, because we are part of that spark which will light the fire, which will make the change happen.
Thank you. Roshni, how about you?
I think it has to be bright. There are no two ways about it. It's very simple. Kids, if you talk to any child today, they have a very open mindset. I mean, all that layering and all the, all the information and all the stereotyping happens once they grow up. I mean, if people in our generation, their parent generation, if we are talking about this, and if we are so open about celebrating our differences and actually having these conversations, that is bound to have a positive impact on the generation that is to come next. And it's bound to impact positively on them, because they're already like very open-minded. So I'm pretty certain that going forward, this conversation will be very different. We will not be feeling shy about saying that, I am neurodiverse. I think there's going to be a level of pride in it, because it's great to be wired differently. Imagine how unique you are. I mean, I would go to the extent of saying that, I would say take pride in being different, because wants to be the same as everybody else, make a difference, stand out, think differently. Imagine how much of a positive impact that you can have in any conversation just because of your pure lateral thinking and your purely high functioning brain, right? Because that's what neurodiversity is. Otherwise it can't exist if the brain is not high functioning. So yeah, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think it's the journey has already begun. And it's definitely going to get much better quicker than we can imagine.
I'm so energized by just talking to you. I'm going to steal a couple of more seconds before letting everybody go. And to me, it's really simple as well. So my brother was, asked to leave a bunch of schools because he was autistic, and not because he was creating anything, like he was not creating any trouble, right? And we were told at one point that you're just in the wrong country. Right. And I think that line has just stayed with me, that, what my brother doesn't deserve to be in this country, or doesn't have the right to education. And I think over time, the system around us did not let me dream big for him, right? So when I grew up, I did not dream that, he'd have like, big ambitions or big ambitions for himself until I met other neurodiverse individuals across the world, right? So especially when in the US, I saw they had full lives, people with jobs and, partners, romantic partners and job coaches, and there's a full infrastructure. And I think for me, the future is a big dream, right? I think I just want all of us to dream big. And I think I've been following that dream for the last 5 years, and hopefully conversations like these inspire others to do the same. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for their time, all our audience members who've stayed till the end, our panelists for being so open, so candid, and sharing your wonderful insights with us. I'm going to stay back for a second in case there's any last-minute audience comments or questions that we'd like to take. So there's one question very quickly, if anybody wants to take this, is how can we improve any alternative solution that is there in Indian students and is competitive to other countries' students? So basically, I feel like they're asking, creating products that are competitive across the world. Does somebody want to take that?
Yeah, I can take it. I think, Indian entrepreneurs and Indian techies have created world-class solutions in so many different realms. There's no reason to believe that we wouldn't. In fact, we are a country where, the majority, you see, it's not even a religious thing that, you actually pray to the goddess of wealth and the goddess of knowledge. So this is a country where knowledge is religion. So I'd say that there are already excellent products built in India and used all over the world. No reason to believe that will not continue to happen. I really want to give a shout out to people at Awaaz, which literally means voice, because it actually provides voice to people who cannot produce their own voice. So I think, the amalgamation of technologies that can be assistive at tech things is there. So there are computer vision specialists, there are machine learning specialists, there are image processing specialists, etc., etc. So absolutely, not only in this realm, even in B2B SaaS, in so many other realms, products built here are taking over the world and helping people all over. So I'd say that our role is to make sure that more and more people know the opportunity here, and that's what I think a panel like this did today. As the only man on the panel, I want to also thank all the women panelists, because it's your compassion which is, I feel actually ashamed that there aren't more men in this space. So please accept our apology, but please also hold us accountable. More people will be there, and thank you for what you are doing, because it's your compassion which is helping the most vulnerable, and that is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all the lovely comments in the comment section as well. Panelists, if there are any last thoughts before we close this?
Actually, nothing from me, but it was a fantastic and very engaging session. And, I learned so much. And yeah, wonderful interacting with everybody.
All right. I'll let everybody go for the evening. Thank you so much for the last hour. It was my pleasure. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, BYJU'S team. Thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Lovely being here. Thanks.
Signing off.